Alright, YouTubers, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mr. Digital45, James Z, and we're about to do the W's. And the W is, to start with, is we had it coming. Next up, we got some Tim Allen and John Travolta and Wild Hogs. Next up, we got Kevin Bacon in The Woodsman. Oh, things falling over here. Next up, we got some Charlie Sheen in The Wraith, part of the Vestron collection video. It's number 20. Then next up we got Ken Wall in The Wanderers. Next up, we got Emilio Estevez and Martin Sheen in The War at Home. Next up, we got some Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Oh, these things are sticking together. Alright, next up we got Bob Hoskins and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Next up we got some Julie Garland, The Wizard of Oz. Next up we got some Danny DeVito, Kathleen Turner, and Michael Douglas in The War of the Roses. Next up we got some Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss in What About Bob? If you're hearing, like always, if you're hearing crunch noises and movement and noise in the background of this video, it's my dogs again. I don't have a door on this movie room. It's a missing door. It broke, so we have to get a new one. But let's continue with the movies. Wind Chill, Emily Blunt. That might be before she was real famous. I don't know. I can't remember. Next up, we got some Adam Sandler and The Water Boy. Next up, we got some Vince Vaughn and Ben Stiller and Jonah Hill in The Watch. Ugh. Next up, we got a movie called Warning Shot. Next up, we got some Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon in Walk the Line. This is the extended cut. Next up, we got a movie called The Weekend, unrated and off the hook. Next up, we got Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton in Where Eagles Dare. He did this movie around the same time he was doing Kelly's Heroes, which he did this one first because it came out in '69, and Kelly's Heroes came out in 1970 maybe. Can't remember. Okay, next up we got Cameron Diaz and Ashton Kutcher in What Happens in Vegas. Next up we got Harrison Ford, Melanie Griffith, and Sigourney Weaver in Working Girl. Next up we got Wild Things. One of the sequels to the movie Wild Thing with Matt Dillon and Kevin Bacon and oh god, I can't think of her name. My brain's going blank. I'll think of it here in a minute, but we'll move on right now. And Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman, the Steelbook. There's the back side of it. I believe this is the 4K. Yes, the 4K. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, there's a nice picture of the Wonder Woman Steelbook. Alright, next up we got some Warm Bodies. Next up we got Edward Woodard, Britt Eklund, and Mr. Christopher Lee in The Wicker Man. This was the original one. This was an Anchor Bay release. Yeah, Anchor Bay. So yeah, this is The Wicker Man. Next up, we got some Kelly Lynch and Warm Summer Rain. Next up, we got some Anna Faris and Chris Evans in What's Your Number, the extended edition. Next up, we got some Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. Margot Robbie's big breakthrough movie. Also, her. Next up, we got some Donna Michi and Dana Andrews in Wing and a Prayer. Next up, we got the classic Weekend at Bernie's with Terry Kaiser, Andrew McCarthy. Next up, we got some Mel Gibson and We Were. Alright, next up we got Jack Nicholson, Cher, Susan Sarandon, and Michelle Pfeiffer in The Witches of Eastwick. I prefer the regular cover. I don't know, that's a good cover too. But alright, next up we got Pierce Brosnan in The World Is Not Enough. James Bond, his second outing as James Bond. Alright. Next up we got Without a Paddle. Next up we got some Audrey Hepburn, Henry Fonda, and Mel Ferrer and War and Peace. Next up, we got some Robert Duvall and James Franco in Wild Horses, also with Josh Hartnett. Next up, we got some Woody Harrelson in The Walker. Alright, next up, we got Gene Hackman and Ray Romano in Welcome to Mooseport. Next up, we got some Bruce Willis and Matthew Perry in The Whole 9 Yards. Alright, next up, we got the late great Gene Wilder, Charles Grodin, Gilda Radner, and Kelly LeBrock in The Woman in Red. Next up, we got the sequel to The Whole 9 Yards, The Whole 10 Yards, with Bruce Willis and Matthew Perry. Next up, we got some Mel Gibson and Helen Hunt in What Women Want. Next up, we got some Robert De Niro and Sean Penn in We're No Angels, a remake of a Humphrey Bogart film, which I need to find. I know you saw this one in a video I made the other day of the U's. I accidentally put this in the U video. This was War Arrow with Jeff Chandler and Maureen O'Hara. I didn't notice until after I made the video, and it was right in there. So I left it in. But here it is in the W's where it belongs. Next up, we got some Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn and Christopher Walken in Wedding Crashers. Followed by Charlton Heston and Donald Pleasance and Will Penny. Next up, we got some Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally. Followed by Nicolas Cage in Wind Talkers, the director's cut. See, that's the thing about some of these movies. In theaters, they just got had their regular rating. Then when they came on home video, they made a director's cut or something, because they didn't want to get a rating they didn't want. Next up, we got some Sandra Bullock and Bill Pullman and While You Were Sleeping. Next up, we got some Kevin Hart and Josh Rad in The Wedding Ringer. Next up, we got a movie called Widows. I'm sorry, not Windows. Widows. There's another me not having my glasses when I should. Alright. Next up, we got The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. Benicio. I'm sorry, it's Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. Emily Blunt, also in this movie. Next up, we got a movie called White Bird in a Blizzard. leg is starting to fall asleep here from sitting, but it'll be alright. On the last stack. Next up we got Shawn Wayans and Marlon Wayans and White Chicks, unrated and uncut. As I said, when it comes out video, they usually do this. So the unrated uncut video. Next up we got some John Wayne in Wake of the Red Witch. Next up we got some Bill Murray and Peter Boyle in Where the Buffalo Roam. As you can see, it has an old Blockbuster Previously Viewed sticker. I had this for a while. Next up, we got The Wild Bunch. That's right. Ernest Borgnine, William Holden, Robert Ryan, Edmund O'Brien, Warren Oates, Javier Sanchez, and Ben Johnson. Very good movie. Very good movie. Alright. Next up, we got some Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in The World's End. Next up, Richard Pryor in 3 different roles in a movie called Which Way Is Up? Alright, next up on the agenda, quit sticking. There we go. We have The Wild Angels, Peter Fonda, Nancy Sinatra, Bruce Dern, Diane Ladd. Directed by Roger Corman. Very good movie. If you like old biker movies, that's the one to watch and have, besides Easy Rider and The Devil's Angels. Next up we got Joe Piscopo and Danny DeVito in Wise Guys. Next up we got a movie called Who's Your Dad? Unrated. Of course, with a name like that. Next up, we got a movie called Whirly Girl. Next up, we got Annabella Sciorra and Jamie Sheridan in Whispers in the Dark. Next up, we got some Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore in The Wedding Singer. Next up, we got some Ryan Reynolds, Waiting. Also with Anna Faris and Justin Long is also in this movie. This is unrated and raw version. Next up, we got a movie called The Way We Were, Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford. Oh, I know, some of you gonna give me heck for this one. Wonder Woman 84, the Steelbook, but I got it real cheap because you know how the movie is. So, but I had to keep it because it's Wonder Woman. Back of it, the sequel, and I like to be a completist when it comes to movies with more than one sequel. Next up, we got some Charles Bronson in The White Buffalo. Alright, next up we got some Montgomery Clift and Lee Remick in Wild River. Hold on. Stretch my leg out and get my light back. Okay. Next up, we got some Ryan Phillippe, Benicio del Toro, and James Caan in Way of the Gun. And I think I found this at the Goodwill. It's probably a bootleg. It's Burt Reynolds and Art Carney and WW and the Dixie Dance Kings. Which I think I really know. I think it's a bootleg. Because look at that. Huh. Oh well. Bought it off of eBay. Oh well. But like I said, it's next up we got some Betty Davis and Joan Crawford in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Next up we got some Burt Reynolds and White Lightning. It's a Kino Lorber release. Next up, we got some When Trumpets Fade. Next up, we got a movie with Amber Heard and Daniel Panabaker and Jared Harris. It's John Carpenter's The Ward. I'm trying to remember his names. Next up, we got The Warriors. Warriors, come out and play. Yeah. I love to find this, to get this. I know this came out with the 4K, and I'm gonna probably go get it. I just wait for the price to come down just a little, But yeah, for now, this will have to do. Alright, next up we got some Albert Finney and Wolfen. Gregory Hines is also in this movie. Next up we got some Christian Slater and Way of the Wicked. Next up we got some Michael Douglas, Charlie Sheen, and Daryl Hannah, and Martin Sheen, and Wall Street. Directed by Oliver Stone. Michael Douglas won Best Actor for that portrayal. Next up we got some Jonah Hill and Miles Teller in War Dogs. Next up we got Harrison Ford in Witness and Kelly McGinnis. Next up we got Bing Crosby and Irving Berlin's White Christmas. Followed by Kevin Bacon, Matt Dillon, and Neve Campbell, Wild Things, Unrated Edition. Next up, we got Clint Eastwood, White Hunter, Black Heart. And finally, to wrap up the W's, we got Val Kilmer and Warwick Davis and Willow. Alright, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe to this video. I appreciate everybody that is subscribing to my videos. And I hope you like the content. We have X, Y, and Z still to go. And then we'll be doing other kinds of videos also. But right now, we end it with this one right now, the W's and Willow. And until next time, see ya.